A survey by the South African Medical Research Council on femicide has revealed worrying statistics around the murders of women in the country. According to the survey, a woman's chance of being killed in the Eastern Cape especially is almost double what it is in the country as a whole, and about half as likely in Limpopo as in the rest of South Africa. 7 women are killed in South Africa daily. To discuss this, I'm joined by Professor Jewkes, Executive Scientist for Research Strategy at the South African Medical Research Council. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Once again, very alarming and troubling statistics.
Good afternoon to you too. They certainly are very worrying. We've been conducting surveys on femicide in the country over more than 20 years. And our last results show us what has happened in COVID, and there is no good news. It certainly appears that the risk of women being killed by their nearest and dearest, a husband or a boyfriend during that period, was higher, notwithstanding the fact that when alcohol was sales were banned, all murder was very much less common in the country, but nonetheless the risk of femicide was higher. And we have seen this marked deterioration over the years in the performance of the police.
I mean, even more troubling is that, the people who are perpetrating these crimes are people who are supposed to be the lovers and protectors of the people they kill. We're talking about husbands, boyfriends, or lovers.
Absolutely. Almost everyone who kills women is somebody who's known to the woman. And we've now shown that 6 out of 10 of the women killed are killed by somebody who is their lover. But of the other 4 out of 10, most of them are killed by family members or by people who are known to the women. It's only a relatively small group. It's between 1 and 2 out of 10 who are actually killed by somebody who isn't known. And all of this makes it very much harder to understand why police performance in formally identifying and arresting perpetrators has deteriorated, and with that, the likelihood of the family of any woman killed ever seeing justice through the system.
And this has been continuing for, in other words, the numbers have been hovering around this level for what? About 10 years now, and they seem to be creeping up.
They have been, yes. I mean, when we started this work 20 years ago, the numbers were higher, and in fact 4 women were killed every day by an intimate partner. But then it dropped down by 2009 to 3, and we have kept it at that level. But now the numbers are picking up, and it is extremely concerning. And as you mentioned, some provinces are doing much less well than others. And what is happening in the Eastern Cape very urgently needs investigation, because it is appalling that we have a province where the risk to women is double that of most other parts of the country.
How significant is the fact that your research has not relied simply on police reports, but you've actually gone to mortuaries and the like?
Well, in terms of the law in the country, every woman who dies in what they call circumstances where the death is seen to be unnatural, and that would include all deaths by murder and other injuries, has to have an autopsy. So the bodies of those women have to go to a mortuary where an autopsy is held, and those mortuaries are run by the Department of Health, and then the police have to be informed of what's happened in the mortuary and what's been found, and there has to be some form of investigation into cases of unnatural death. And even if they decide in the end it was an accident, there still has to be an investigation that establishes what happened. Our study is much more reliable than just using police statistics, because one of the very worrying things we found was that over the years, a variable number of cases were not in the police system. And in fact, in the last year, it was nearly 1 in 10 were not in the police system. And that obviously is very worrying. When we do the research, we try and get the police to open cases. But a case that isn't in the police system hasn't even had the most preliminary investigation conducted.
Well, could that then not be the explanation to what we're seeing perhaps as a rise, the creeping up that is, in other words, because the data is a lot more reliable and a lot more representative, we are suddenly seeing the numbers going up, when in reality it could be that the numbers have pretty much stayed the same, high as they are, and one is not taking away from that. But the fact that you are now making the numbers a lot more because of what how you've gone about collating this data, now it does seem like the numbers are creeping up, when in fact it's probably where it was, or it's been over the past 10 years, except you've now come up with a better and more reliable and more accurate way of collating these numbers.
Well, it's always important to consider an explanation like that, but sadly that's not what we're looking at, because we have used the same methodology in all of our 4 surveys. So all of our 4 studies are directly comparable, and all of them have given estimates that are an improvement on the police data, both in terms of completeness, but also because the police routine statistics cannot accurately divide cases between those perpetrated by an intimate partner and those perpetrated by somebody who's not an intimate partner.
How then, when you reflect or look back, I mean, between 1999 and 2009, we saw a drop, a sharp drop in these numbers. What happened then, compared and contrasted to what's happening now?
I mean, I think there were 2 big things that were happening in the country at the time. Very specifically, we brought in gun control in 2004, and there was a massive move to try and reduce the number of guns in circulation in the country. And one of the things we particularly noted between 1999 and 2009 was a large drop in the proportion of these female murders that were executed using a firearm. And unfortunately, since 2009, gun control has all but been lost within the country. And we now see that the proportion of murders executed with a firearm is actually higher in 2021 than it was in 1999. So that is an extremely worrying statistic that needs to be addressed with a policy response. But I think the other thing which is important to recognise is there are links between all violence against women, including murder of women, and the socio-economic context within the country. And between 1999 and 2009, there were substantial improvements in the living conditions and the standard of living and general optimism within the country. And I think that that is probably one of the major factors that led to reductions in female murders. But we know that since 1999, the unemployment has been creeping up, and it has escalated during the COVID year, which we've just studied. And we know that there has been a sort of backlash against the earlier attempts to really try and strengthen gender equity within the country. And although we have administrative equity in terms of our constitution, what's happening in homes and communities has gone backwards since 2009. And the patriarchal context of this country and the social norms that go with are very important drivers of all violence against women, and particularly femicide.
Of course, Prof. I mean, research is and can't be about counting cases or comparing statistics. They have to result, as you correctly pointed out, in a policy response. Is there any evidence of a corresponding response?
Well, there are moves afoot to try and strengthen the response, but they are not being given the commitment that they need in terms of the financial commitment from the National Treasury and the policy commitment and prioritisation. So, for example, we've gone a long way towards establishing the Gender-Based Violence Council, but it hasn't been funded, so it hasn't been set up. We have a national strategic plan. It's largely an unfounded mandate. We know and we talk about the problems within the police service, but there really needs to be a demonstration that the resources are put in place in order to be able to really turn things around at that level. And if we look at the way in which we resource, for example, murder investigations, it's at a far, far lower level than that in high-income countries. And it is hard to say that we have a real commitment towards bringing perpetrators to justice if we don't actually put the resources into the police force, coupled with strong management and really robust systems to enable the police to really be able to do their job properly. And we really need to drive ahead and to resource the whole programme of changing gender norms across South Africa, because until we tackle these patriarchal social norms, we're not going to be getting down to some of the most important root causes. So I think what we really need is for the government of national unity to stand up and say, this is an outrage. We've got to do something about it. And we've got to make sure that all the government departments, particularly the National Treasury, come to the table.